Good evening, Xavier basketball fans. It's the RaGing X Report with Jim Reeker and Bill Gabriel. We're here to talk about Xavier basketball and everything that's happened in the last week and looking forward. Musketeers off another good week, stand at 15-13 overall right now, 7-8 in the Big East, and have climbed all the way up to a tie for fourth place with the Seton Hall Pirates. Let's bring in our key analyst, Bill Gabriel. How's it going, Bill?
It's going just fine, Jim. How are you tonight?
I'm good. It's great to be a Xavier fan this week and last week. We're on a 4-game winning streak. And before we get into the games, just want to mention that just today, Najee Marshall was named Big East Player of the Week. 22 points he averaged, 6.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists. Just a shout-out to Najee Marshall, who's really kind of stepped up here in the last couple weeks for the Musketeers. He was on the honor roll last week, and again, this week he's Player of the Week.
Yeah, that's a great honor for Najee to get. He's played so well the last couple weeks.
Yeah, and remember at the beginning of the season, some people thought he was maybe slighted by not being put on the All-Star team. But Najee's it's not been all smooth for him this year. He's had some rough patches, struggled a little bit with turnovers, but he seems to have, number one, found his three-point shot, which has helped immensely, which has started to help open up some of his other games, and he seems a little more comfortable out there as one of the key players for the Musketeers. Well, let's talk about the first game. Got to go back a little ways. Last Wednesday night, I believe, Seton Hall, Musketeers, well, you know what I thought when that game was over? My thought was a win is a win is a win. As the Musketeers squandered, I believe, a 16-point lead at one point in the second half, but held on for a 1.70-69 win over the Seton Hall Pirates. What were the keys to that game, Bill?
Well, I think in that game, one of the big keys was putting up a bunch of points in the first half. They gave themselves a nice cushion there, and then they kind of gave away a little bit of it. Seton Hall came out and hit a run, and then Xavier went on a 17-3 run in the middle of the second half that gave them that huge lead, only to turn around and enable a 17-2 run by Seton Hall. But really in that 17-2 run aspect for Seton Hall, Xavier was just missing shots. They weren't really turning the ball over a whole lot during that time period. They turned it all over in the second half mostly when Seton Hall made their first run in the beginning of the half. I think they only had two turnovers in that 17-2 run right at the end of the game. You look at the play sheet on the Go Xavier website, and it's just missed shot. So they were lucky to get through that. But probably the biggest thing was, man, it was still a really solid defensive effort. That gave them that opportunity, because they made it really difficult on Seton Hall to score even during that run. So the defense was pretty solid. I think that's what ended up saving them in that game.
Yeah, and also they held Miles Powell, their leading scorer, to 17 points, and again, they just didn't let him go off. And also, I think, and I looked it up, that 6:23 remaining in the game, Musketeers, Najee hit a three. They went up 68-52. So talking a 16-point lead with 6:23 remaining in the game. And, you got to think, hey, we can't get in a hurry here. We need to take care of the ball. But as I think we were talking about this weekend, it's kind of a fine line between taking the air out of the ball but trying to stay aggressive too, so you're giving yourself some decent shots. So, with a 16-point lead, you can almost milk the clock every possession, but you got to score a few times, and they did not. The next time they scored, there was 2:48 left in the game, and that was an Elias Harden layup, and actually if I recall, that was a cross-court pass that he kind of intercepted and laid in. I don't think it was actually intended for him. It was intended for Tyreek, who was about 10 feet behind him. So, but I think it's part of the learning process that the Musketeers have to go through, how to close out a game.
Yeah, that's definitely something they got to learn and figure out. They're getting there. Playing with the lead for most of the game is not something they're really used to. It's a lot different when you take the lead later in the game and then surge out, or hold on right there at the end, surge away for the victory. But when you have that lead, build that lead in the first half, and then got to close out that whole second half. That's going to be the next benchmark as they grow, to just how to do that and just make it a resounding victory instead of a, oh my gosh, we got out of here with that one, boys, kind of feel to it. But they were still pretty jacked to win that one.
If you saw we talked about the locker room celebration afterwards. They knew that was a big game. Najee Marshall had 28 points, 6 boards, 5 assists, and his 4 turnovers, which, again, I think that's another place that Musketeers need to keep working on that. And really, overall, 17 turnovers, way too many. Lucky to get out of that. And their free throw percentage, recently, not quite sure why, free throw percentage hasn't been as good as we'd like to see it. Only 56%, 9 for 16 in that game, left 7 points out there. But the two key factors, 47% from the field and 36% from three-point range, 7 for 19. Those are some key factors that led to that victory. Any other comments about the Seton Hall game? We got out of there with a big win on the road.
Hey, it's always good to pick up a solid road game and have that confidence going out on the road as they wrap up the rest of the season here.
All right, we'll move to yesterday's game. The Villanova Wildcats come calling, and, of course, since the Big East, the Musketeers have joined the Big East, only defeated Villanova once. That was 3 years ago at Xavier when Villanova was ranked number 1, a big upset. Nova, and we talked about it, that the Big East did them no favors. This was their 3rd game on the road in a row, and actually became their 3rd defeat in a row. What led to the victory over the Villanova Wildcats kind of going away?
Well, you got another big game from Najee Marshall, which is obviously contributed to his Big East recognition. They had a lot more of a supporting cast in that game. Paul Scruggs played really well. It's been a few games since we've seen him play well, and he had a great game. Quentin Gooden had a pretty solid performance. You got solid contributions from Tyreek Jones and Zach Hankins, and then they got some bench stuff coming in, and Elias Harden had some more contributions in the bench role. He made some threes, and had another nice pull-up jumper from the free throw line extended area. So he had a lot of great defensive effort. I mean, the whole team played so well defensively, and it seemed like Villanova, every time they took a shot, had a hand right in their face. So it was just a great, solid defensive effort from everyone who played in that game on Sunday, and contributed to that win. Because to hold Villanova to 33.9% from the floor, is incredible. And then on top of it, they only shot 4 free throws.
Which means they weren't fouling.
Yeah, they weren't fouling, and they weren't letting them get in the lane where they could cause problems and make them foul them. So, man, that's just some great defense.
Yeah, and another factor there, the Wildcats, who are usually an excellent three-point shooting team, were held to just over 27% from the three-point line. And, in fact, their star, Phil Booth, was 2 for 9 from the three-point line. So it seems like we've talked about in this 4-game win streak, it's been defense. Why do you think the defense is starting to play so well? Are they just figuring it out? Are they getting used to each other? Are they just figuring the system out? What's your take on why the defense has finally stepped up, because it had played pretty poorly up until a couple weeks ago?
I think they just get it. I don't know. I don't know if it maybe it's all finally gotten to the point where they're not thinking about it. They're just doing it. That could be huge. I mean, when something finally becomes so second nature that you just do it without, processing it, it's just a natural reaction. That to me is the way it looks, because you just see they're communicating a lot better. From what I can tell as an outsider looking in, and that just seems to be the biggest part. Is that trust is there, and understanding.
Yeah, and we've heard all along that that Travis Steele had not lost the locker room. Everybody was still working hard. Everybody was still pulling together. And at some point you had to think, well, is that just coach speak? Is he just, trying to keep them motivated? But it seems like, we haven't seen any dissent really, especially with the short bench they have. A lot of guys not getting much playing time. Another key to that game was 10 turnovers, and again, that's what we've always talked about is kind of the goal. If they can keep it at 10 or less, they got a chance, I think, to win any game. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there were only 3 in the second half when they really kind of pulled away from the Wildcats.
Yeah, they had I think they had most of their turnovers in the first half, a pretty low number in the second half, which probably contributed to their excellent offensive play that they had for a pretty good spurt there in the second half.
Yeah, and Steele also in his press conference says, I think that they're kind of a team when they play good defense, and then it kind of rolls over into their offense, that they get more juiced and amped and seem to do better on the offensive end. Here's a defensive stat that just, I think is astounding, talking about the team that we were playing and the team we've had such difficulty with over the first 5-6 years of the Big East. From at 12:41 in the second half, Sadiq Bey dunked one in to give Villanova a 44-41 3-point lead. 12:41. They did not score their next points till there was just 3:37 remaining on the clock. We went over 9 minutes and held the Villanova Wildcats to no points. That is just, in my mind, is just an unbelievable stat.
I know, especially with as offensively talented as they have been and are. Yeah, that's just some solid defense, and I don't remember seeing too many just wide open, easy, uncontested pull-up jump shots or anything. Catch and shoots, everything they were working for, and when they would finally take a shot, there was a hand right there, which was just incredible defensive performance.
And also, Coach Steele pointed out that that they were able to switch all their ball screens at one time. He said that he thought was kind of when they started to really make that run. And he says the only way they can do that was the fact that Tyreek Jones can do that on any player and be able to guard any player on the floor. That's the only way they can get away with doing that. And he commented that he was maybe one of the keys on that defense, even though he only scored, I think, 6 points, had 8 rebounds. Said that he was a key player in that victory through his defense and being able to do that, and they could switch that up.
And not only that, but if you don't notice where he is and you take a shot, you better look out because he's coming, man. That block shot he had in the second half was huge on, I believe it was on Booth.
He was like behind the first row of defense and kind of jumped up behind us, and that was really brought the Cintas Center, the crowd, the house down, and kept the energy and emotion going. Well, what a great victory. Again, only the second time that the Musketeers have defeated the Wildcats since joining the Big East. Remember last year, of course, we won the Big East. We are the defending champions, but we still didn't beat the Wildcats last year. Well, a couple interesting questions for a little bit of a discussion here. So is this the run number 2? Remember, the run, as they call it, was 2004 when the Musketeers were sitting at 10-9 and went on a run where they won 16 of their last 18 games, won 4 in the A-10 tournament to get into the NCAA, and made a run all the way to the Final 8, and actually at one point had Duke on the ropes in that game that would have put them in the Final 4, although I think Anthony Miles fouled out, and that game kind of got away from them. They only ended up losing by a few points. Could we see that happen again with this team? Do you get that feel?
Man, I tell you what, watching them Sunday, I'd say anything's possible, because the way they played that game was, if you can't believe in them as a Muskie fan, trust me, those Muskie players believe in themselves, and there's no reason to think they can't pull that off. I mean, they got to go to St. John's, to Butler's, and then St. John's at home. And essentially, what it boils down to is Shamori round 1. You got to handle Shamori Pond and the rest of that St. John's team, and then you got to go to Butler and just pound them to death inside, just make them hurt. And probably the same thing with St. John's, and the talent of our big men are something they can do, and I think they can make that run, and then it's just a matter of who they catch as things settle out in the Big East tournament.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think the Musketeers can still make the NCAA tournament even if they don't win the Big East tournament? Is that still an outside possibility in your mind, looking at where they are?
I think if they win out the regular season, which would have them beating St. John's on the road, that gives them, I think I was looking at that stuff today, that gives them another one of those, what do they call them, quad 1 wins. So that would get, because it's a road game, that would give them a quad 1 win there based on where St. John's is. Everybody is still talking up Butler as being the 4th team in from the Big East, and like, you go in there and beat them, you've already proved that you beat them on their home court. Hey, you're better than they are. They better, should be paying attention to what you've done. It would probably knock them out of that conversation. And then it's just a matter of, in that short time span, being able to then, on senior night or senior day, take care of St. John's again for the second time in Shamori round 2. Because if they get him the first time, he's going to be coming hot and heavy in the second one. To try to, because they're playing for their positioning as well, and if they lose both those to Xavier, they may give up. Depending on how things shake out, they can giving up 3rd place in the Big East, because they're not that far ahead. They're 8-7, so they're 1 game kind of up. So if they drop 2 to Xavier, and Xavier wins out, they could end up 3rd place in the Big East. That's a pretty comfortable spot to be at it in the tournament. And I think if they win those 3 games, they got to make it to the conference championship game. That would give them 20 wins plus being there. Yep.
And of course, I think that semifinal game, which they would have to win, would be another quality win. Maybe Marquette or Villanova again. So, I think if they win the next 5, make it to the conference championship, maybe don't get the job done there. Again, I always thought 20 wins coming from a big conference is a pretty good win total. They would end the Big East season at 10-8 with a winning record there. I think that at least puts them on the bubble, puts them in the conversation. I was just checking the net, which I don't understand all the net yet, but going into this week, they were 90 in the net was their ranking, and with the 2 wins this week, they only jumped up to 84. But again, they got three quality games coming up with the 2 games against St. John's and the game against Butler. So those 3 wins should really propel them up. And, in fact, I saw their one site I was on, their remaining strength of schedule was ranked 39th, which is pretty high. So, and that's not even including what they may see in the conference tournament. Well, as we continue to talk about this run a little bit, if you had to pick one player, and again, I don't think, the easy answer would be it hasn't been one player, because it hasn't been one player. But who do you think is the most important player that maybe has spurred this 4-game win streak for the Musketeers?
I'm going to go, the obvious choice is Najee Marshall. Just his play these last 4 games has been incredible. And he's played 159 of the 160 minutes. So
which he could have never done last year.
Yeah. He's staying out of foul trouble, and it's not like he's not pulling the other team's best player, because he's getting that guy a lot. He's most often on their best player or their next best player, depending on how that shakes out. If the best player is a point guard, then it's most likely Quentin Awning, or rotating off with Scruggs. But if it's a guy over 6'4", Najee's on him, and and he has taken the big shots and made them in this run. And then my other, not like key as in scoring points or whatever, but what he's given them, I'll tell you, it's the emergence of Elias Harden. You look over this same stretch, he has played really well and given them, a lot of defensive contributions, some points, just, a key bucket here or there, nothing, it's not more. I think, the most points he scored in this run was the 8 he had yesterday. But man, he had blocked shots. He's been an impactful defensive player. So I'd say that as a bench player has been really important to this run as well.
I have to agree. And, we've heard for the past 2 years that he's supposed to be a great shooter, and we've started to see a little bit that. He nailed a couple 3-pointers from the corner yesterday. In fact, I was on YouTube one day and just happened a high school tape of his, highlight tape came up, and I watched it. It was about 10 minutes long. And in high school, I'm going to tell you, he was filling it up from outside the 3-point line. So I think maybe he's starting to feel comfortable, starting to get it. The games maybe, as we talk about, starting to slow down for him a little bit, the college game. And, I think that's a good choice. I think I have to go with Tyreek, just, again, the things that he's done, staying out of foul trouble, playing great defense. He can give you great offensive play also. You get the ball to him and he gets a step, it's an automatic score. His little baby hook has really improved. I think he's been a major, and plus he just brings so much energy to this team, and I think everybody else feeds off of him. He would be my choice. But again, the reality is it hasn't been one guy. It's been 5, 6, 7 different guys. And as we talked yesterday, or I even made the comment, and it pretty much happened, I said Paul Scruggs has to start playing like he was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, because during some of those bad games, he was the one who was really kind of playing well. In fact, go back to the first Butler game and the comeback against Georgetown, he was the key in those games. And if he can get back to that level, adding to the way other people are playing, this might be the next run for the Musketeers, but it's not going to be easy.
It never is, Jim.
Well, let's look at the Big East real quick. It's, again, as we've talked about, kind of the top 2 and the rest, the other 8, kind of still in a little bit of a clump, although it starts to spread out a little bit from third place, St. John's with 8 wins, but you still go all the way to the bottom, Providence and DePaul with 5 wins. So in the win column, they're still only 3 games back from third place. And actually in the loss column, there's still only 2 games out of fourth place. So it still has those bottom 8 have a big chance to change here in these last 3 or 4 games. We did the Marquette Golden Eagles a big favor with that win yesterday. Actually gives them a 2-game lead in the loss column over Villanova. And actually they play on Wednesday. And if you want to watch that game, it's at 9 o'clock on Fox Sports 1. And that would actually, if I'm figuring this right, that would give the Marquette Warriors at least a tie if they could defeat Villanova at Villanova, which won't be easy. But that'll clinch a tie with 3 games left, and then they really only have to win one of their last 3 to be the outright champions. And, of course, who did you and I both pick to win the Big East in the beginning?
Marquette.
So we're pretty smart. And I picked Villanova as my second choice. We picked a second choice, and I think you picked Seton Hall maybe?
Yep.
So, and they're sitting right there in fourth place, tied with the Musketeers. And there's just a lot of games going to go on that are going to have bearing on these standings. And these standings are going to be so important because the top 6, of course, get a first round bye, so to speak. The bottom 4 have to play 4 games to actually end up winning it. So it's important to stay in the top 6. And, you look at the Musketeers, if they win 3, they're pretty much assured of being in the top 6. They lose 1 or 2, they could slide back into that 7th position and have to play 4 games. And then I think their chances of making the NCAA will be very, very slim. Well, let's review I guess it wouldn't really be a review, kind of an odd schedule. And I see a lot of the teams in the Big East have this where there's one team they haven't played yet, and they play them 2 games pretty quick as a turnaround here at the end. But talk about, and you've already mentioned Shamori Pons, and we're all familiar with him, but what are the other weapons or what's the style of play of the St. John's Red Storm that we're going to have to look at on Thursday night?
Well, the style of play is they just, at least early in the year, was they just wanted to outscore you. They weren't playing a whole lot of defense, and they were putting the ball in the basket with pretty much effectiveness and efficiency. This team can flat out score the basketball. All their starters average double figures. So you got Shamori Pons at 19.7 a game, Mustafa Heron at 15.4, LJ Figueroa at 14.2. He's also their leading rebounder, and he's 6'6". Marvin Clark, 11.3, and then Justin Simon at 10.1 points per game. So that's all their scoring. That's the guys who got all the minutes. They don't have much of a bench. They got one guy, he averages about 15 to 16 a game, I think is what his minutes are. Not many points. I think he scores 4 or 5 points a game. So I think with these guys, for Xavier to really flex their inside strength and just put them in a bind. Because if they can get a couple of these guys in foul trouble down low trying to guard Tyreek and Zach, they're in trouble because they just don't have that much depth, and they don't have much on their bench. They got 2 6'9" players on their entire roster, and both are freshmen. So that if they come in to try to check Hankins and Jones, they'd be licking their chops. Because that's, I think, for Xavier's success, this game especially, is to really focus on, trying to get those big guys the ball and get them involved, because they have to really hit these guys with that height and strength down low, because they're definitely a pretty good guard team, and you don't want to try to turn it into a shootout with them.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think the Musketeers are going to have to play more of a half-court game and control the half-court. What I've seen St. John's, watched them play a few times, they really like to get out on the fast break if they can and play kind of a frenetic style. And I think the Musketeers can't do that. I mean, I'm not saying at times they need to get their fast break on a missed shot or a turnover going. They can do it. But I think they can't get into an up-and-down game and turn it into a big turnover game. I think the key is taking care of the ball. And, again, I think exploiting them inside, controlling the rebounds, getting extra shots, especially on the offensive end. And I think it's a very winnable game for the Musketeers. But it's not going to be easy. Again, it's on the road. They get a little bit of a layoff here, though. Actually, the Big East has been a little bit kind to them here at the end. They play Thursday, and they don't play next weekend. And I believe that Butler game's the following Tuesday, followed by the following Saturday. So they are getting a little bit more time in between their games, which might help them out and pay big dividends for them. In fact, a couple of the Big East teams, I think Marquette and Georgetown, still have 4 games to play, looking at their records. So, and I believe the game's going to be on campus. I was watching them last week, and I thought the announcer said that was their last home game at Market Square Arena, or not Market Square Arena, but the Madison Square Garden.
Yep. I read that too.
Market Square Arena, going back to the Indy days. So that would have been nice maybe to get on that court and play in front of that crowd, although it's not going to be the same crowd that will be there for the Big East tournament. But we aren't going to complain too much if the Musketeers can bring a win home. All right, any final thoughts before we go into trivia?
I just hope that they can pull it off. It'd be fun to see them dancing if they can do all that, but if not, it's been a heck of a run just to try to get there.
Well, and I think, and I hear the players when I've watched their press conferences. The one thing they say, obviously it's been put into their head by probably Travis Steele and every coach, is we got to take this one game at a time. And they always say we got to get back to practice tomorrow and get ready for the next one. I think they realize that their margin of error is very, very slim at this point. In fact, I think if they don't win 5 straight, the only way they're going to get into the big show is to actually win the Big East tournament. So they have to win all 3 of these last 3 games. And, again, probably at least 2 into the Big East tournament, giving them a 5 in a row, and that would be a 9-game win streak. And even if they lost the finals, it'd be 9 out of the last 10. Again, it probably will be an anxious Sunday, but at least I think that gets them in the conversation. Definitely would probably have them finish 3rd place if they did that. And you got to think if you finish in 3rd place in the Big East Conference with 20 wins that you're going to get in. But we'll just see how it plays out. Ready for a trivia question?
I am.
I thought I would mention Travis Steele. You got to feel great for the guy. He was asked in his press conference if during the 6-game losing streak, when there were times he questioned what he was doing, he's kind of looking at him like, you always question, when things aren't going right, what you can be doing. But you got to feel good for him because I think the guy works hard. He's kind of put in a tough situation with all this new pieces, so to speak, loss of a lot of the leaders and high expectations from a program that's not used to not winning a lot of games in recent history. But the trivia question for tonight is, can you name the university that Travis Steele worked for right before joining the Xavier Musketeer staff back in 2008?
Was it St. John's?
Nope. I'll give you a hint. He grew up in Indianapolis. He went to Butler.
Right.
It's not Butler.
Indiana?
You are correct. He was hired in 2006 to be the video coordinator at Indiana, and then the next year he was made an assistant there before coming to Xavier the following year. In fact, a little bit of his resume, he actually, again, he went to Butler University. I think he graduated in 2004. While he was at Butler, he was actually, I don't know if he was an assistant or maybe the head coach at Ben Davis High School in Indianapolis. 2004-5 season, he was a graduate assistant at Ohio State, and I believe that's where he crossed paths with Sean Miller. 2005-2006, he was assistant at Wabash Valley College. And again, 2006-08, he was at IU for 2 years. And then he was actually hired by Sean Miller right before Sean Miller left for Arizona, and then Chris Mack retained him. So that's Travis Steele's voyage or trip to get him to this point, and now he is, of course, the head coach of the Xavier Musketeers. All right, well, we want to thank all our listeners for listening to us, and thank my good pastor for putting us on the Grueling Truth Network and all the platforms that you can listen to us all. And any parting words there, Bill?
Looking forward to hopefully a continued good streak for the Musketeers.
All right, so hopefully we'll be back next Monday night to talk about a big win over the St. John Johnnies and get you ready for that Butler game. And we'll close, as always, by saying, go Muskies.
Go Muskies.